Kia ora, good evening. Welcome back, Lou.
Right.
My name's Hannah Denton and I'm the Communications Manager at Breast Cancer Foundation New Zealand. Welcome to tonight's webinar. I hope you're staying warm and dry in this torrential weather wherever you are. And tonight we're going to be talking about chatting about breast cancer with our children. We know that breast cancer is deeply personal and it's often overwhelming, but when you're also trying to explain it to children, it can feel even more complex. How do you balance honesty and hope, reality with reassurance, and what words do you use? And how do you support your kids when you're still processing everything yourself? And tonight, that's exactly what we're here to explore together, and I've got some people here to help me. I'm joined in person and online by Lou and Angela, who will share their experience with breast cancer and sharing that news with their children. And then we're also going to hear from Hetty McIndoe, a counselling psychologist, with some helpful tips and strategies about how to support these tricky conversations. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. We'll use the chat box this evening to take questions to answer at the end of the evening. So if you pop in a question, we'll get to them at the end of time. Don't worry about getting it all down in the first 5 minutes. We'll be refreshing that chat box as we go. Also, we know that you might need to nip in and out for dinner time, for kids, for feeding pets. So if you miss any information, this webinar is being recorded and we'll send it to you tomorrow. So with that being said, first up, we're going to hear from Lou, who was diagnosed late last year with hormone receptor positive breast cancer at the age of 47. Welcome, Lou. Could you please tell us a little bit about your breast cancer journey and how you shared that with your son?
Hi, I'm Lou. So I was diagnosed in November last year and had my mastectomy on the 31st of December. We are travelling down the treatment path now with endocrine treatment and radiation therapy starting next week, and we've just finished chemo. But that's not what you're here for. My son Theo is 9 years old. There we go. And at the time of me being diagnosed, he was actually 8. I didn't realise that when I got the information out. So we in our family believe in full disclosure. We're quite a talkative family. We tell each other things that we need to know. We didn't want Theo to think that we were hiding from him from anything. So I took him along to my first mammogram. His grandmother and his great aunt both have breast cancer, are still alive. So it was just a way of explaining to him how he could support people in his life. After we had gone through all that treatments, all those little bits, we took him to a follow-up appointment because we'd been diagnosed so that he could ask questions that he wanted. Fortunately, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. He sat in the appointment with the breast nurse and kind of played on my phone, didn't really involve himself. The nurse noticed that he was not really asking any questions, so she turned to him and started explaining what would happen with my mastectomy, with the explanation of the drains that are now called amethysts being called grenades. And all of a sudden he was all over it. He started asking her questions, started explaining how he was scared, and actually started getting involved, so he actually could ask the right questions that he had been thinking. So like I said, we had a mastectomy on the 31st of December. His biggest fear was that something would go wrong with my operation and that I'd no longer be able to hug him. So he took it on himself to be in charge of the drains, although he wasn't quite impressed with them once he actually figured out what they did. And we took it from there. Like I said, we've had such a quick turnover with my diagnosis in November. So we tried to keep him included in the change of plans. We all shaved our heads because that was my biggest fear. So he dyed his hair pink one day and then shaved it in the afternoon. So we will have no hair. With Theo, his biggest responses have been being sad and being angry. He's quite an emotional kid, but he's not particularly negative, which is great because I've taken this whole thing in my stride. But he's that little bit more, a little bit sadder, a little bit angrier. You can see that things are weighing on him. So we've just tried to talk him through everything. At school, he doesn't seem to be a different child. His coaches and his teachers all tell me he's the same kid that he's always been. But he is the kind of child that will tell me when he's having a rough day. So we debrief quite a little bit. And more, it's about how his day went and why it was sad and why he was angry, and not so much about what is going on with me. He has made comments though that he doesn't like it. He doesn't like having to share my time, Dad's time. He doesn't like the fact I'm tired, and he doesn't like being able to do stuff because we don't have the same kind of money that we used to. I'm not very good with these buttons. So, like I said, we try to debrief every few weeks, like a big debrief, but he talks to us all the time. We make sure that we give him lots of hugs. He is a very, very affectionate child. And like I said, he doesn't really talk about the cancer. He's not really interested in that. He, in his brain, and a couple of comments that I've made, this is all, the cancer's been dealt with, and this is all treatment to make sure I stay around. So what I did do in the beginning, like I said, I took him to the mammogram, but I've also had him come along to chemo appointments. He came to a couple of blood tests. He came to my bone density test, just so he can see the machines that I get involved with and realise that it's just pretty mundane. It's not very exciting at all, and he's not really missing out on anything. The other thing that we do as a family is we celebrate our milestones. So we'll do something to celebrate as a family every time something goes well. It's my key takeaways. Can't believe I met this one already. I find that being honest with him is the biggest part, and not just with him, but everyone around me. We've got big communities that we deal with, and knowing that they know how to talk to Theo and that they're going to say the right things and they're going to say the same things I am is really good. It means that I don't have to worry about anybody saying the wrong thing or putting their foot in it. This continuous disclosure is a big thing for us, and keeping our family and friends with us in this whole journey helps everybody involved.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lou. It sounds like he's been really receptive to all those steps you took to make him feel really included.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, that's all we hope that you know, if it's right. And this is just another one of those tricky conversations. Next, we're going to travel virtually down the country to Gore, and we're going to hear from Angela, who was also diagnosed late last year at the age of 40, and a little bit different to a 9-year-old. She's going to share her experiences of going on this journey with her 17-year-old daughter. So take it away, Angela.
How are we going, guys? I'm Angela, right from the deep south where it's nice and crisp today. Now, my journey began back in November last year. Middle of November, I found a lump myself, and I toyed with being busy at work. I thought, I'll just delay it till after Christmas when we get a bit quieter. And I sat down and thought to myself, well, why am I doing this? If it was my daughter or my mother or my sister, I'd be telling them to go and get it checked. So I did. I went to see my GP, and they rushed me through for a ton of tests, and mammogram and biopsies and all that sort of whirlwind stuff went through. And 19th of December, I was diagnosed with breast cancer after I met my surgeon. So from there, I was booked in for surgery on the 8th of January. I had my first lumpectomy and the sentinel node clearance. Out of that results, they found that there was cancer in one of my nodes. So they went back to do the axillary node clearance, and they thought they'd do more of a re-excision of the margins on the original lump they took out. So that was on the 12th of February. Now, from there, they actually found more cancer in the breast. So the decision was made to do a delayed mastectomy and start a round of chemo first. Now, right from the get-go of all of this, it was very important that Tegan was involved in what was going on. She knew right from the day I found the lump that, Mum's got a lump. We have a history of lumps in our family, so breast checks are very important, and being she's a young woman, I make sure that she's aware of, knowing her normal. So yeah, went through chemo, and just had a single mastectomy done on the 11th of June. So I'm 7 weeks post-op tomorrow, and everything's healing really well. Yeah, and as with any of these journeys that it comes along, everything evolves and changes. And as Lou's pointed out earlier, the biggest thing for us, and probably a lot of families will be the same, is keeping it open and honest in the communication. That way it doesn't make it super scary for them. And that hails back to when I was a child. I lost my father to cancer when I was 16. And my sister and I weren't told till he was quite ill that he actually was riddled with cancer and, was on his way out, so to speak. And I didn't want that for my daughter. Our family's built on honesty. And my partner and I both work on the same thing, and we just keep it at a level that she can understand and keeping those communication lines open so that, she can ask the questions that she needs to find the information out. And for every appointment I've been to, we come back, we have a debrief, go over what was said, share the reading materials that I was given, so for drains and wound care, lumpectomy, the mastectomy, all of it. So yeah, she's got all the access to the same materials that we've had, so that she knows where, mum's at and what the process is going forward for us. So my daughter is very lovingly, she's been to every single surgery of mine. She's been there the day I've gone in, and it's been really lovely having her with me as well. But she's coped amazingly well with all of this. She's very practical and open-minded. And we approach the new information quite differently. I always work in my head, what is the worst possible outcome that it's going to be? And I think, okay, if I can deal with that, losing a breast and going down that road, chemo and all that jazz, then I can work backwards from that and go, okay, anything over and above that is going to be easy. It just makes it so much more bearable for us as a family going forward. These are the steps that we take, and it allows us to keep positive, which is good for Tegan. And we just make sure that she's got the full picture of what's going on so that, there's no surprises for anybody. Right, next slide. So for keeping her involved, the biggest thing is, again, communication. When I started my chemo, obviously my hair started falling out. So we went to the hairdressers, got nice short cuts, and she did that volunteer on her side. And then once mine actually started properly falling out, she actually shaved my hair for me. So that was a nice family moment for us. And once I had the mastectomy, she actually made me a crocheted knitted knocker, and because she's quite the hobbyist, and she made a black and yellow one, and we've dubbed it the booby. So that larks back into our sense of humour. So we've taken this whole journey with our humour with us. We joke around, about things, like the boobies is a good example. But we also have a very dark sense of humour. So nothing in our house is taboo. And yeah, it just makes it easier for everybody to cope, and it allows taking that space to actually, have her voice heard and be able to just take each day as it comes for us. All right, our key takeaways from this journeys. Yeah, biggest one, be honest. It doesn't matter how old your kids are, they're going to know something's going on, but just keep it at a level that they can understand. They don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of the medical jargon if they're not old enough for it, but just, let them be aware that, yeah, mum's going to go through changes. Mum might be having surgery. Mum's hair's going to change. My other piece of advice with having a daughter, especially of the teenage years, is letting her know that, be aware of what your body's doing. Be aware of how it is, what it normally looks like, what it normally feels like. And yeah, just let them ask the questions and be honest. That's probably the biggest things for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angela. I am sensing a theme of honesty and openness here. I'm sure we'll see similar from Hetty as well. But before we get there, it sounds like it's actually been quite a nice journey for both of you to go through it together, having your daughter with you. And I really appreciate as well that message of knowing what's normal for your bodies at all age for young women as well. So thank you for sharing, Angela. I'm going to pass over now to Hetty, or lean over there. Hetty is a counselling psychologist from Kids Therapy. And Hetty, we know that these tricky conversations can be challenging, but why is it important to have them? And specifically to breast cancer, what are some tips and things that parents and families can be doing to prepare for these conversations with our young people?
Thank you, Hannah. Yes, and I'm going to speak a little bit and continue on, I guess, on the themes that Angela and Lou have talked about, but more from a theoretical point of view on what the research and best practice suggest. So I just want to start off with saying there's no one way, right way, or perfect way. And I think often as parents, and particularly when something is out of our comfort zone, we often strive to kind of know what is going to be the best way or the right way. But continuing on from what Lou and Angela have talked about, there are a lot of benefits to talking to children about tricky things that are going on. So for in this context, a breast cancer diagnosis. So kids are little barometers usually, not all of them, but most of them are quite sensitive to what's going on around them and will be quite quick to pick up if there is something going on, if there's secret chats happening in another room, or if someone's upset, they'll start to pick up on it. And without the information to make sense of it, they will often fill the gaps and try to make sense of it based on whatever is going on in their own minds. And so by including them in the conversations, it just helps to provide space for them. It also role models how to talk about hard things. So along the way with whatever they're going through, they know that they can bring their questions to you, that they can, this is a safe relationship to talk about hard things, and that you as the adults are open to holding their feelings. And that our feelings aren't something to be, sorry, just flipped through a little bit too quick, so I can go back. That our feelings of sadness, of anger, whatever the feelings are that they're experiencing, are not anything to be scared of or avoided, and actually really natural to what they're going through. So some points around if you have not yet had this conversation with your child, or if there are more conversations to have with them, just some points around what might be helpful to think about. So I think having a plan or a practice ahead of the time with a support person, whether that's a professional or someone in your family or friend network, just to kind of get familiar with the words, and you might anticipate the types of questions that you would expect from your children. You might also have a think around how emotions and these sorts of conversations are generally managed within your family. So if this isn't kind of the norm to talk about hard things, then you might want to put more thought into what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. If you've got, say, for example, if you already do family meetings or that type of thing, you might already have kind of a format to bring these sorts of things up in. And just having a check-in with yourself around how you're coping and strategies to get through the conversation, because ideally you won't be too overwhelmed in your emotions during the moment of that conversation. So it's having a think about the type of environment. I think ideally a familiar setting, somewhere that's not overly stimulating or distracting for you or for your child, somewhere where there's time and space to allow for a natural response in a conversation if that's what your children want to have. So it could be at home, or it could be somewhere secluded, but somewhere that you're familiar with. Just also thinking about if you have multiple children, if you've got children of different ages, temperaments, maturity levels, you might have a think about whether you do that all together as a group or whether there's some advantage to doing that separately. But also keeping in mind that kids might have a reaction to that if some children know and others don't. So trying to not put too much time in between those conversations. And also thinking about who can support you along that, and if you need a support person, or if you have the preference of someone having that conversation, initiating that conversation on your behalf. So talking about breast cancer, trying to keep it simple and brief to start with the idea that there will be more conversations and time to build on that information as you go. Using clinical or specific terms rather than a vague description, so differentiating between breast cancer versus just being sick or having a cold. So particularly if you've got young children, they might not understand that this is different from having a tummy bug, that you can just, have a rest and you'll feel better. Metaphors can be really nice ways for explaining things, again, to younger children. So you might talk about how cells are like a building block. There's a metaphor of a garden, so thinking about your body as a lawn, and when we grow a lawn, sometimes weeds can pop up, and cancer is like a weed, and so there are different ways of removing the weeds. We might dig them out, which could be like a surgery, or we might spray them. So as a metaphor for chemo, but then also that can generalize out. So, if we spray the lawn, that can also spread to healthy parts of the lawn. So thinking about side effects and how your body can be impacted. So as a guide, you might, if you were thinking about having this conversation, you might have a think about what is it that my child needs to know, and make some points around that. So letting them know that you've been diagnosed with breast cancer and what the kind of treatment plan at this stage is looking like, and really importantly, what that means for them. So we know that children are quite egocentric, and they experience things in terms of how it's going to impact them. So any changes to their routine, any changes to what is their norm, letting them know what that's going to look like, who's going to be picking them up if you're the person that normally picks them up from school, or where they're going to be staying when you're in hospital or at doctor's appointments. And keeping that just, quite brief and simple. And then leaving space for their questions. So that is where, based on your children's temperament and their developmental stage, they might have questions, they might not. And you can explore these in the conversations that you have over time. So that doesn't need to be just one big conversation. Preparing yourself, that I think most children might ask about death and what's the likelihood of death. So again, keeping that balance between the honesty of, I think starting with the information that you've been given by the doctor. So whether that's something along the lines of, at this stage, the doctors are really hopeful that with the treatment, I'm going to get through, and this is all, this is something that we're going to go through, but I will come out the other side, versus if you've got other information where it's more unsure, then again, holding that in the balance of hopefulness that we're going to do everything we can. I've got a lot of support around me, and keeping that transparency that you will keep them informed if anything changes, just so that they can relax into that truthfulness and honesty. And if you've got a child that is prone to anxiety, we know that anxiety feeds on the unknown. And so if a child's got a lot of questions going on in their mind, if they know that you're going to keep them informed and you're going to have these conversations, then it can just provide them and you a little bit of relief around that. So how children might react, there is a whole spectrum of possible reactions, and also that these reactions might come and go throughout the time period. So a child might initially, I think a common initial reaction would be shocked, unsure, and then depending on your child's temperament, you might see different kind of behaviours or reactions arise. So for children, often worry will look like clinginess, repetitive questions, really seeking reassurance, not wanting to be away from you, and somatic complaints, so sore tummies, headaches, sadness. They might become a bit more withdrawn and distracted. Some children may take on it or want to take on a level of responsibility. So they might be worried about leaving you. They might be feeling like it's not okay for them to go have fun while they're not with you. Some children might develop their own health fears or health anxieties, particularly if there is family history. You could get nightmares, anger. So this could be a way of children upregulating, which is basically a way of outwardly trying to seek connection. So particularly if adults, and understandably, but if they're preoccupied with what they're doing, it might be a way of trying to get attention and seek that connection from the adults in their world. It could also just be that they're angry about the situation, but their anger is projected onto the parent. Other behavioural challenges, so increased in rule breaking or defiance. You might get some school refusal, which could go alongside with the separation anxiety. You might see kids disconnecting kind of in a protective way. So if it's too hard for them to be around what's going on, they might disconnect from a parent, and they might also have to go through a process of connecting more with another parent or another adult caregiver who is within the family network. So that might be a transition period if you've been the primary person doing pickups and drop-offs and that sort of thing, and someone else is having to take that on, and then a child adjusting to that. And yeah, understandably, you might see a regression in behaviour, so increased baby talk or bedwetting and reversion to previous stages of development. This is an image that I often use with parents when we're looking at behaviour. So using the analogy of or metaphor of a iceberg, in that we see what's on top, and usually that is what we see the behaviour. And often as parents, we respond to the behaviour. So I like to get parents to have a think about what's underneath the behaviour. What are the emotions and what are the needs, and how can I connect at that level? Particularly if you've got, the kind of acting out or externalizing behaviours, which can feel really tricky to manage if we think about what's underneath that, and how can I connect or address that need. So providing understanding, validation, and reassurance and hope. I have now broken down some slides into different ages, just with some key things to think about. So if you have a really young child, I'm thinking kind of under the age of 3, the primary need is around attachment and close connection. So in using your support network to think about who, if you're not able to provide that at certain times, who can fill that need, but also in times when you can, just really prioritizing that closeness and attentive interactions. Using really kind of simple explanations and using the words that you would normally use for your breast and illnesses. So I might just say, I've got a lump in my breast, or I've got a bad lump in my breast that needs to be cut out, or I need medicine. Really, preparing kids for what they can expect in the short term. So where you're going, when you're going to be back, who's going to be looking after them. Maybe preparing them for how things in the relationship might change. So they're going to need to be more careful when cuddling, or that you're going to have less energy or not be able to play certain things. I'm moving on to slightly older age range. So these kids will, and I'm speaking in generalizations, but we'll have a bit more understanding of what it means when someone's sick. You might need to clarify that cancer is not contagious, it's not their fault. So some kids can internalize that because I said I hate you yesterday, now I've made mummy sick. So clarifying that this has just happened and it's nobody's fault. Trying to keep as much as possible the normal routines, rules and boundaries, just to keep that predictability for them. However, depending on what's going on, these, may need to be flexed and adapted if required. So I'm thinking like screen time, if you need to use more screen time on a day where you're not feeling well or have less energy, then doing that. Really prioritizing moments of connection. I've got another slide around setting up some of these things. Listening to any worries that they've got, giving a lot of reassurance about how much they're loved and they're going to be cared for no matter what. And frequent, really short check-ins. So kids at this age are very in the moment, and they might have a really big worry 1 minute and then moved on. So you might need to also repeat yourself and also re-explain. They might have a repetitive question. So yeah. Also with this age, the use of books and diagrams and play is really helpful. So if they've got a toy, then you can maybe use the toy to explain what's going on. They might want to cut their Barbie's hair. There's lots of books that you can look online. I've named a couple at the end of this as well. So yeah, moving on to school age children, I would start with trying to establish, so saying I've got breast cancer and establishing their current understanding. They might have had a previous experience. They might need to have their understanding or corrected, just so that it is accurate for your diagnosis. They have a bit more ability to be logical, to understand the process of sickness, the sequence of getting treatment and then needing recovery. With this age group, you might see lots of kind of wishful or hopeful thoughts, and I think that is really normal and natural. And I'll talk a little bit more about when that becomes problematic or something that you might want to look into further. I think trying to identify who are their key support people and who are people that would be helpful, so that to also know that this is going on, whether that's their teacher, a close friend's parent, grandparent, particularly someone in the school who can just keep an eye out as well for behaviour changes that you might not notice at home. And also similar to what Angela and Lou have experienced, that kids this age and older like to feel helpful. So giving them a sense of purpose and responsibility that's age appropriate, a way of joining you in this process as well, can give them some reassurance and inclusion on that. I think for this age and the teens, just keeping in mind if they're tech savvy or likely to go and try and do their own Google searches, just having some websites that you can direct them to that's going to provide them with relevant and reliable information. So teens will likely have heard the term cancer before and have some knowledge, but might still need some clarification. So again, just saying, what do you understand this to mean? They might or might not have more detailed questions and want to be more involved in the treatment and the process that you're going through. They might, so this age group might develop some health anxieties, some compulsive worry or checking, and it might be helpful, particularly if there is that family history, to have some information on hand just so that they have some accurate information. Again, different responses. You might get some kids that are a bit more socially anxious or might be more embarrassed than a younger child. They might feel more disconnected from their peers and would likely, I imagine, feel some confliction around these emotions, so not wanting to upset you, but also maybe feeling embarrassed about any changes in how you look or just the fact that they're feeling different from others around them. So just having a space to talk through all of that and finding ways to make that work. Really important to, as much as possible, try and keep kids in their usual hobbies and activities along, things that are healthy for their stage of development and building their independence, and also considering what else they've got going on in their life. So if they've got exams or pressures in their hobbies, just making sure that they have, or that you let them know as well that you're going to just check in with people so that they have the right support around that. So some tips and strategies, just really taking advantage of times when you're feeling well and you've got increased capacity. So that might look like taking a kid out of school for half a day, or just doing something that when you have capacity to really maximize that time with them. Talk time is a strategy that I use with parents a lot. So just having regular and predictable times for check-ins, and this might be to talk about cancer, but it could also just be about the other parts of what's going on in their life. You might make some specifications that once a week or once a month we're going to talk about cancer, and the other times we're going to talk about other things, but just a regular and predictable time for kids to share what's on their mind. This is a time for you to listen and validate. It's not about necessarily you talking too much. So just hearing what's on their mind. Special time is a really nice activity for younger kids. So just, it can be short, but activity that's child-led. It's not about instructing or teaching or directing. It can be watching them do whatever it is that they like to do. And using timers for younger children can help to frame some of those activities. The hand activity is one where, so you could all do this together, but draw around your hand and then identify 5 people that you would want to know or that can help support. Older kids might have a list of questions for medical professionals or want to be part of that process. And then the last point is around activities, particularly for kids maybe that are less verbal or less likely to talk about what's on their mind. They might want to write a card or a letter, might have a way of interacting around that. Could also be for separation anxiety. So if you are going to be away from them for longer than what they'd be used to, that you leave something with them, whether that's a card, a letter, drawing a heart on your hand. There's also one where you could make paper chains. So I call it a love chain. So one loop for each night that you're going to be away, and a little message on that loop, so the child can open that each day, and it's a way of helping them to see visually when you're going to be back, but also a nice way of keeping connected. So it's really normal that kids will have some sort of reaction. You might see some change in their behaviour. If that change is prolonged, prolonged, and if it's having a significant impact on their functioning or the family's functioning, then you might look at getting extra help. So particularly if there's changes in their sleep or their eating, really high level of distress or separation anxiety, or the opposite around flat disengaged withdrawal. And I've also made a note around compulsive behaviour, which can be internal or external and not always easy to observe. But you might notice kids saying, we've got to do this in order for tomorrow to be a good day, or you've got to touch that or pick this up, or I can't touch that or pick this up, that sort of behavioural counting. They might be stepping over cracks, those sorts of things that you might start to see. And if you ask them, hey, what's that about? They link it to, in some way, being able to control what's going to happen as long as they do that or don't do that. So if you're seeing that, then I would look to get some help. So these are just, not an exclusive list, but just an idea of community supports as well as different resources. So the DOC method is a book, I believe, from the UK, but it's, if you had a child that likes a workbook, it has a lot of diagrams and things for them to write their own experience of cancer. And Mummy's Lump was just one of many picture books that I found. You can look on YouTube, but if you don't want to buy the book, often people will be reading. I think Mummy's Lump is a mother reading to her son, and it just explains what is going to happen. The Invisible Strings, a really nice book for separation anxiety. Just talks about how we're connected no matter where we are. And then if you're looking at therapeutic options, there's all sorts of therapy out there. Play therapy, art therapy, talk therapy. There's also websites around developing minds, or Hey Sigmund is another one that I can add into that just have lots of articles and things as a starting point around building resilience in children. I think that's no, not quite finished. So this slide is just talking about metastatic diagnosis or reoccurrence. So I think for this discussion, it would just be really about providing a space to talk it through, providing space to hold the feelings, considering bringing in the network around you, and just sticking to the information that you know, but also if you don't know yet, then just being honest with that, and giving permission for children to express their emotions, their sadness, their anger, and you also expressing your own feelings around that. Yeah, I had the last point. It might be a little bit niche, but I guess if children do experience loss of a significant person, then how, and this is probably more for support people to be thinking about, but how that can sometimes translate into the way they relate to people and the way that they seek connection with others. So you might see that and talk to them, have those conversations with them. So that brings me to the end, but similar to what Lou and Angela have talked about, I think honesty and simplicity is the best starting point, and then just really working with the emotions as they come.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hetty. We do have some questions that have come through, and we'll just jump back to metastatic diagnosis quickly, because we've had a question there about how to communicate that with teens. And I will just preface by saying a metastatic diagnosis could be as a result of recurrence. So there would be some understanding of breast cancer first within the family, or it might be at the time of initial diagnosis. And this question is specifically related to conveying that conversation with teens. But do you think that's a situation where getting some extra support would be really helpful?
I think so. And I think if possible, kind of setting that, that our health, even if we're okay right now, our health can always change, and keeping that, like I said right in the beginning, just, when things change, that we will let you know, and then coming back, if that's the case, that we need to talk about something hard, and this is the information that we've got. This is what we know at this point. And yeah, like you said, getting some added support.
Do you think in that context as well, and that was the extent of the question that we received, so I don't know how the person is coping, but is that one of those situations where you'd want to explore how they're feeling first before they have that chat with their family?
The person who has. Yeah, I think definitely, and it might be more of a case that if they're not ready or not feeling like they are, capable to have that conversation, then looking at a support person, someone else who is connected to the child that can initiate that.
I'll also just flag here that Sweet Louise are a great resource for metastatic diagnosis, and you can contact them and have a look at their website. There are some pointers on their website about how to have these conversations, particularly around there can be some anger and confusion for children if there's a sense that, but mum did everything she was told and it's still come back. So I'd have a look at Sweet Louise, and that's definitely one where it's probably a little and often conversation to keep going as you all evolve with those feelings. I'll stay with you, Hetty. I've got another question here about what about in blended families or separated families? How do you get a co-parent on board to share the news of a diagnosis so that it's delivered consistently? And is it important that it's delivered consistently?
I mean, I think you work with what you can. I am a step parent as well, so I have some experience of working with that dynamic. I would probably talk to the other parent or about this before the children, so that they're aware that you're going to either be that you're going to be sharing this information with the kids, so that they're also prepared to ideally provide some support alongside you. Yeah, and have those conversations with the kids as well.
Cool. And you mentioned when you were talking about behaviour changes that you could expect and that a range of behaviours would be expected, you mentioned that there'd be concern when it became prolonged. Is there a sense of how long it is when it is prolonged?
I hesitated when I said that because, yeah, I don't think there's any hard and fast rules. I think that if kids were experiencing difficulty for a couple of months, that then it can't hurt them to look to get some support around them, but to expect some initial reaction as they settle in and as a family, as you find whatever the new normal is.
Yeah. Right. This is a question for Angela. Does your daughter talk about your diagnosis with her friends, or is she a little bit more shy or recluse about sharing that? How does she feel about talking about it outside of the family?
Yeah, no, she's been very good. We have her friends over quite regularly. We have open conversations. All her friends and her boyfriend both know that, they can ask me anything, absolutely anything under the sun, and I'm happy to answer their questions. Because for a lot of kids, they hear the word cancer and it's automatically negative. And I don't want that for the next generation coming along.
Yeah, it's awesome. Have any of those conversations with your daughter involved body image or changing bodies, given that you've had a mastectomy? Has that come up at all?
No, she's very body confident in herself, as I am in myself as well. I mean, yeah, okay, I've lost a breast to this, but it's not the be all end all for me. For me personally, that doesn't make me a person. I'm still who I am. And, that's a big, powerful thing for a young woman.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you've got a booby now, so
yes,
that's awesome too. Lou, someone noticed that you said you found your lump at the end of the football season.
Yeah.
Are you back playing soccer again? Fellow soccer mad person worried it will be a long time.
So when I discovered it, I was quite concerned and had a mastectomy in the off season. And then my club decided that they were going to do summer season football, which really threw a spanner in the works. So as soon as I was able to, I was up and playing, but then I had the portacath put into the chemo and I was told I couldn't play football until the end of the season. Then I was told the radiation therapy would make my bones brittle and I could break bones. So I'm off for a season. I will be back next season. Hopefully I'll be back in the southern season, but it'll be dependent on how much therapy I get through. But in the meantime, I'm the treasurer of my football club, so I'm quite constant there.
Still football all the time. I've got a question here as well that you mentioned you celebrated the big milestones. Firstly, what were some of the ways you did? And two, how do you find the energy while you were still recovering?
I sleep a lot. I'm lucky. I have a job where I work from home, so I can do 2 hours work, have a quick nap, do something else, have a quick nap. That made my life so much easier. But the things that we've done, so before we went into the mastectomy, we went out for dinner, just the three of us, and just had a really nice dinner out. And then once I had healed from the mastectomy, we do folk festivals. So the Auckland Folk Festival was on Auckland Anniversary Weekend. So we camped, well, the boys camped and I drove home because it's only about 15 minutes from home. And then at the end of the first set of dose dents, so I had 4 dose dents chemos, we had another festival, which was down in Hamilton, and a whole lot of our family, our festival family, as we call them, celebrated with us. And 2 weeks ago, I finished my chemo, the last of my chemo, and my work girls and I had a team leader retreat, and we went down to Hampton Springs, so I celebrated that one. Haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do for the radiation yet, but it's going to have to be better than Hampton Springs. So
tough call. Hezzy, another question here for you. What happens if that first conversation doesn't go well? Sounds like maybe there's some pressure for it to be correct. If I'm too emotional or I go into too much information or not enough, can I repair that later?
Yes, definitely. I think there's always a chance to reconnect. So I think just, working with what's happening. So if you're noticing a big escalation or even in yourself, if the words aren't coming out, then just notice it will explain, what am I trying to say? Reflecting that I'm getting really upset and I'm not getting my words out in the way that I want to. So we're going to talk about this when I'm feeling a bit more ready, or I can see that this is really upsetting you if the reaction's coming from the child. So let's just put a pause and we're going to keep coming back to this and coming back to what you're seeing in terms of the emotional response.
Another comment here, I can't afford counselling or therapies for my child. We're down to one income with me being sick. What resources or free services are there that aren't just books? Child is 7 and throwing lots of tantrums.
It might be one that I need to come back to there. Is there Kenzie's gift?
Kenzie's, yeah.
Yeah, so is a service that provides, I think 12 sessions for children. I think you have to apply, so I don't know exactly what the criteria is. Otherwise, there's the Gumboot Friday service. So I think they
Children over 5. Children have to be over 5. Yeah, 4 sessions.
4 sessions that are funded. Otherwise, I'd be asking through the DHB what services.
You could also potentially have a chat to the school SENCO at your school. There might be some counselling or relational services through your school. Any other resources that we think of in the meantime will pop in the email tomorrow with the webinar recording.
Yeah.
But also this is not in a professional sense, but as a parent, remembering that just being outdoors and being at the beach can sometimes change a scene. Not everything has to cost money. Things can be free. Do you have any things that you've done that are free?
Keeping the routine. He does kickboxing and football and singing, so he's kept all those things. We have got one of the online books from Kenzie's Gift. I've got sent that, so we're working through that. And just having that openness to be able to talk all the time, and at the most inopportune times as well. Like, it's not going to be the greatest time for you necessarily, but when they need to talk, they need to talk. So I've found that just being able to stop. And when I go back to that, being honest to everybody, a lot of the time it's down at football. So there are lots of people around that hear it. So the more, and a lot of younger kids, because of course he's playing with children that are younger than him. So just knowing that they are welcome to ask questions as well. And I've got one little girl who keeps telling me she doesn't like my hair and she wants me to grow it back. And she wishes that I'd hurry up and come off the chemo. So it does extend out, and other people learn about it, which really helps, I think.
That's really cool. All right.
But I think coming back to that question, I mean, I don't know how long it's been since they've been diagnosed and talked to their child, but I think that kind of escalation is kind of to be expected for some kids and their temperaments. So also just holding on that it hopefully will settle as well as things become more predictable and
and just one final point. It's not a question that's come here, but one thing that has come up is you mentioned, Lou, that everything's just sort of 10% more, the sadness, the anger, everything's just slightly heightened. Is that true of your capacity as well? Is that going through treatment slightly less?
You get more tired, so your day-to-day is less. You don't have that energy to put out there, which if you weren't going through any of the things, like even just that whole brain space, irrelevant any of the therapies or treatments, you don't have as much capacity or the willingness to put up with things. So it does make things a little more difficult. It's always nice to have those other people to bounce off. Whereas I am quite envious of people who have larger families that are going through this, us being a 3-person unit. If things are going wrong, they're usually going wrong for all 3 of us. Whereas with larger families who have more family around, not necessarily the same way, they've got other people that they can talk to, which is quite lucky.
Someone else has just put in the comment in relation to that last question that there's also the cancer psychology service through Mid Central DHB that offers some free services. So I'll pop that in the resource tomorrow too. Thank you so much for all these questions. That's all that have come through this evening. It's such a big topic, and as you can see, there's lots of ways to approach this and lots of things to consider, including ages, your child's developmental stage, how you're feeling, and your treatment plan as it evolves. I will send out an email tomorrow with this recording and the resources that we've mentioned tonight. I'll just change my slide so you can see the next thing. We also have our wonderful nurses who are available on the nurse advice line. They're nurse specialists. They're available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The number is there on the screen. You can also join our online community by BC on Facebook. It's a fabulous community of women like Lou and Angela who are all going through this journey and can share tips and strategies, concerns, questions, lots of helpful info. If you want to join it on Facebook, just pop in a request and that's monitored and controlled and we can let you in. As I mentioned, tomorrow I will send out that was the last slide. I will send out that email, and that email also contains a quick 2-minute survey. We would be greatly appreciative if you could fill that out. It just helps us know what topics to discuss, what things people want to know, the timing, the days, all of that kind of feedback. If you'd also like a call back from one of our nurse specialists, there's an option to put your name and your number down on that survey and they will reach out to you. So that's it from us. Thanks so much to Hetty and to Angela online and to Lou for joining us. Hope everyone has a fabulous evening. Ka kite anō. Good night from us here at Breast Cancer Foundation.